Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. And today we're going to have an open mic day. So you get to determine the topic of the day. So look forward to hearing from you. Remember to let us know where you're joining from, and uh, and be sure again today is your day to speak up, share your thoughts and questions and all. Look forward to hearing from you. As we always like to start the show with a description of what we believe wisdom is. And for Wisdom Seeker Live, our definition of wisdom is it's a journey, and it has three major parts of that journey. And that starts with knowledge. We gain knowledge uh, formally or informally. Hopefully, you're learning something new every day. If not, it's worth trying to make that a priority. Second step in that process is gaining understanding. And understanding is when we begin to take the knowledge that we've gained from whatever means and begin to apply it and use it. Use it in a way to solve problems, in a way to come up with innovations and ideas and things like that. And then the third step in the process of gaining wisdom is when we go from knowledge and understanding to actually wisdom. And what makes the difference there is our perspective. Wisdom is when we move and begin to see things and begin to use our knowledge and use our understanding in a much bigger picture. And that is especially a picture outside of ourselves, outside of how it affects us, recognizing that what we do, what the choices we make, the way we behave, not only affect us, but affect others as well, and beginning to see that perspective and making choices from that perspective, not just based on ourselves. And that is when we start gaining wisdom. And that wisdom will help us to be able to make better choices if we allow it to. And so that's our wisdom journey. And we look forward to today gaining some additional wisdom, either by sharing with each other or by conversation discussion. So, however it works, the goal is that each day we are a wisdom seeker and that we pick up some new wisdom each day. Welcome, Jeremy. Glad to have you with us as always. Appreciate your thoughts, ideas, inputs. And as I said, today is open mic day. There are many topics that we might discuss. We always have the option to discuss education and the challenges there, and then careers, career choices, whether to stay at a job, leave a job. If you're a job seeker, ways to get wisdom there. There is just, again, numerous topics. One that of recent that has been on my mind is that we seem to spend a lot of time making either or choices about lots of things. It's either this way or that way, and we are, as a result, making choices that we want to treat as either or, when the reality is that there may be more than either or, yes, no options as we address life and as we address the questions in life. And so that's one that I see of recent that I think that we need to gain some wisdom and insight to. Of course, education is always a topic that concerns me because our current education system continues to be broken, and it continues to not match up with life and give our young people the choices and the information they need to make a good choice, decision in their life, and move forward. This week, or I'm sorry, last week, I had the good fortune of being at the Skills USA Georgia State Leadership and Skills Conference. I was there with Independent Electrical Contractors Association and had a great time talking to probably, 300 students over a couple of days. The event was magnificent. There were about 6,000 people attended, lots of young people competing in skills and professional contests, and just an opportunity to see young people doing good things and to get the opportunity to shine for doing those things. So there are bright spots related to education. The problem is that those situations are not the priority in education. Our priorities in education currently are sending everybody to be doctors, lawyers, and accountants, and which has created its own challenges in our world. It's contributing part now to why we're having trouble, for example, with logistics. Our logistics chain is in trouble because we don't have enough people to carry out the logistics that are needed. Enough truck drivers, enough crane operators and forklift operators, different skilled jobs that we have been pushing as second rate for so long. And now we don't have the people to keep our infrastructure running as effectively as possible. So that's another area to consider. One of the topics that is also out there is what's going on in the workforce. We're headed towards potentially the perfect storm in the workforce. And if you're interested in more detail, there's an article I have on that topic on my profile on LinkedIn. But if we're not very careful in how we choose to respond to remote working question on a large scale, we're going to end up with some real challenges in terms of the workforce. A big time disruption, and in some ways has already started as we see the Great Resignation, quiet quitting, people not entering the traditional workforce. There's just lots of different challenges going on there. Let's see here. Jeremy comments, there's always wisdom in our choices. If we can separate our emotions from the equation, we can better make the right decision and choices. The challenge is, and I agree, Jeremy, we need wisdom in our choices, but culturally, we have chosen not to make wisdom a priority any longer. And as a result, our choices are not coming from a wise place. They're coming from a reactive place without consideration of long-term consequences or choices that can affect us, one choice affecting us better than others, and even how our choices affect those around us. And so, yes, there should be wisdom in our choices if we make them. And emotions we have to be careful of because we can get carried away by our emotions. But if we learn to use our thinking, our intuition, our discernment, as well as our emotions as part of the equation, and put them in a wise perspective, we have better chance of making better choices. Welcome, Rosemary. Always glad to hear from you, dear friend, and I appreciate you joining us. I know with the time shifts here in the U.S., maybe that makes it a little more palatable for your schedule, but thank you for making the effort. So again, today we've got an open mic day. And so if you have a question or topic that you want to put out and for us to discuss and seek wisdom on, please do so. Another topic I know that's really on my heart, and this kind of a theme, if you will, for this year is about the pace of our life. We have a real problem in that because of technology, because of a lot of different reasons, the pace of our life has continued to pick up to a point that I believe that we are in a situation where it's not sustainable, that we can't continue on, not help in a healthy fashion, to be able to sustain. We are just not being healthy at our pace. We're going much too fast for the way that we as humans are built to be. Welcome, Lydia. Glad to have you as always. So 11 p.m. in Sydney. Well, again, appreciate you staying up, Rosemary, and hanging out with us, because I always appreciate your thoughts and inputs, as well as everyone else's. And remember, today is a open mic day. So if you have something on your mind that you want to put out to everyone and to have discussion on, we can do that. By the way, on the 27th, we're going to have a guest that will be joining us, a young lady I found on LinkedIn that is, for her generation, is making an effort to bring wisdom to decision making, which, as you can imagine, is something I'm very supportive of and excited about, having someone that will voice that in a big way, because I believe that's something that we are in desperate need of. I think we've got now at least a couple of generations that wisdom is not promoted. Wisdom is not a priority. And we've had several generations that the primary focus has been on knowledge. We are theoretically a knowledge-based society, which I challenge that, because, we can have all the knowledge in the world, and if we can't gain understanding and do something with it, it's not effective or it's not helpful. And then if we have the knowledge, and even if we gain some understanding, but we lack wisdom, then as a byproduct of that, I believe that we lose any form of discernment, and as well as the concern now is that common sense is not around anymore. I think that's, again, a byproduct of not making wisdom a priority in our lives and in what we do and the choices we make. So wisdom needs to be a priority for all of us. Obviously, I hope that you will all be #wisdom seekers, and that you will seek to make your choices from a wise perspective. That perspective being one that is much bigger than ourselves. And as those of us that have a spiritual bent say, we hopefully begin to see things through God's eyes. We see things, we see people, we see situations through God's eyes. And that is what is a primary driver as we begin to make choices in our day-to-day life, for short-term, mid-term, long-term, all of it. But if we make choices just based on our knowledge base, and we're very limited because of perspective. One of the things that making decisions just based in knowledge is we miss a lot of unintended consequences. Part of what wisdom brings is better perspective on the consequences of our choices and what can play out, and not the ones that we think about immediately, but we also began to possibly see unintended consequences, and those are the ones that quite often get us in trouble. Let's see, Rosemary has a comment. I decided a long time back that I needed to slow down and live at a pace that suits me. People know that it's pointless to try to get me to rush. People also know that Sunday is my day for the garden. Working in a garden requires slowness, and it requires patience, and it also requires belief and faith and grace. I appreciate that, Rosemary. I really do think that we all need to consider our pace, that we are just operating at an unsustainable pace. And that part of my inspiration on this actually came from a video that I saw at church, and it talked about moving and living at 3 miles per hour, which is basically the concept of walking as primary transportation. But the implications are well beyond the idea of transportation, but it sets a pace. And in this situation, a young pastor was challenged not to focus on the day-to-day activities of sorts, but rather take the time, slow down, and focus in on life and people and getting to know people and understand people. The goal was to grow the ministry that he was in. But the point being, operating at a pace is such a slow pace is such a key piece, because that is the pace that we are most healthy in. And again, when we talked about this before, I assured people I'm not suggesting that you go sell your cars or never ride trains or fly or any of that. That's become a part of our culture and in some ways a necessary part. But it doesn't mean that we have to live at that pace in a constant fashion. And Rosemary, your comment about setting aside a day is another area that I continue to think and grow concerned about, that we do not have times in our lives that are set aside for rest. And that the amount of time at this point, anybody stopping and taking time to rest a bit is an improvement, because many of us are at a nonstop pace. Then we don't stop to rest. And I appreciate the value of hard work and commitment and how we value that, and willingness to pay the price and all to get things done. But there's a point where we have to back up and say, wait a minute, that is not sustainable forever, should be. And so including that day of rest is very important. I think that that day of rest per week is a minimum. I think that there are moments throughout our day that we need to take, even if it's just a few minutes, close our eyes and just try to take deep breaths, relax a bit, and consider what's going on. And what people worry about, I think, is that their production will go down. And there is now a lot of evidence, though, that people that take time to rest and be mindful, the time that they use to rest and to refresh or reset actually improves productivity, because it's better suited to who we are and what we need to be about. Hello, Eunice. So glad to have you as always. Thanks for being here. Look forward to hearing your comments and thoughts as we have an open mic today. And so far, I've thrown out of various topics. Another one that, of course, is a part of this show, and it is a challenge that's out. And what's interesting is this challenge is also something that will contribute to taking a different pace, and it will contribute to slowing down a bit. And that is the 40-day challenge that I initiated first episode of the podcast. And this 40-day challenge involves a process that helps us to begin to gain wisdom. And it involves 3 steps, just like wisdom is a 3-step process. If we take time and choose these 3 steps and do them regularly, it will help us grow in wisdom. And it will also help us with working through and navigating life. But the first one is to disconnect. Part of the reason that many of us are at such a crazy pace is we don't disconnect. We're always connected to data. We're always connected to something. And then what's really concerning is that the areas that we are connected in so often are not giving us the information or the perspective that we need. It's very often very negative, and it leads us to want to try to take or have concerns over things we can't control or influence. And so it puts us in a bad spot. So disconnecting, and there are two major ones. One is social media, and we are all, I would think it's fair to say we're all overdone on social media. I have to struggle with that too. And so I'm trying to begin to address that. But traditional media, and that is the consumption of news. And much of the news that we are exposed to through those inputs are things we cannot affect. We can't do anything about it. We can't influence it. We can't control it. Yet we keep putting it in front of us all the time. And by doing that, the byproduct is it creates anxiety. It creates fear. It creates worry that we aren't supposed to be carrying. And so disconnecting is such an important part. But if we disconnect, though, and we don't begin to find ways to fill that time with appropriate responses, then we may create a different problem. And one of the things that we all need to do, I don't care who you are, including me, is during the time of disconnecting, removing all of those inputs for a time, a minute, an hour, a day, something, that we then take the time to observe. And we need to be observing inwardly. We need to be looking at what's going on inside of us. Unfortunately, a lot of us try to pretend that those things aren't going on. And I hope I'm not offensive by this. It sounds sexist, but it's a true thing. And that is us men are especially bad about this, that we pretend like things don't bother us and we put them in our various compartments in our life and close the door on them and pretend like they don't factor. And at the end of the day, they do harm us. They do cause problems. So observing inwardly, then observing outwardly. Part of the challenge and reason that our pace is such a problem now is that we're moving at such a pace that we're not seeing what's going on around us. We're not even seeing people. We're seeing activity and things, but we're not really observing it. We're not paying attention. And if you want to test this theory, you can just ask yourself the last time you went from one place to another, and especially if it's some place that you have been before on a routine basis, and ask, what was there? Were the plants cared for? Was the grass maintained? Were there any changes there? And quite often we don't remember. We are not aware. So observing outwardly as well. And at the end of this process, we've disconnected from things, and then we begin to observe. The next step is, what is a wise perspective on it? If I look at this in big picture, in the next few months, next year, next several years, or for those us that are of a spiritual bent, we start thinking, does this matter in light of eternity? And when we start thinking in those terms, it changes our perspective, and quite often it will change our choices, and it will cause us to have different perspectives. So thanks for being here, Rosemary. Appreciate you making the effort, and hope you get some good rest, and we'll see you next time around. Let's see. Jeremy makes a comment. We all need time to decompress, even the most wisest person, and the way to do so is by taking time to disconnect and rest a little. Indeed. Part of the reason that there are a lot of people that are highly intelligent, okay, they're very well educated. There's lots of adjectives that we can describe them, but they are making unwise choices because they are not, they're so caught up that they are not seeing things. They're caught up in activity and busyness, not business, but busyness, and as a result are missing so many things. Welcome, Travis. Glad to have you here. Feel free to jump in, ask questions, make comments. But so the pace that we live at is really a problem. And our willingness to make choices to affect our pace is important. The pace that each of us needs may vary some. At a minimum, I appreciated Rosemary's comment. I do think that by design that we all are designed to get a day of rest each week, whatever that looks like. However you plan it and do it, you know, whether you agree with some of the religious connotations or not, you can shoot yourself in the foot by saying, well, I'm not religious, I don't want to do that, and suffer the consequences for not taking time to rest and rejuvenate. It is just such a critical thing. And the fact that many of us are getting to the point that we're staying in a constant state of overwhelmed indicates that we've got a problem with the pace in our life, and that we are not taking time to rest, and we're not letting go of some things we need to. And we are not driven by vision and mission and values. We're just trying to get along and get by. We're trying to earn a living, and we live paycheck to paycheck. And I understand, I've been there, I've done that, and I appreciate how that we get caught up, but that is not sustainable. It's not healthy. We cannot live that kind of pace and stay healthy, not mentally, not emotionally, not physically, or not spiritually. If we are not willing to challenge those questions and those choices and learn from it, get some wisdom about it, then we're going to suffer for those choices. Travis makes a comment. Enjoy your bread and butter that you work for and relax. Indeed. What we have to be careful of is to make the choice for the relaxed part. Many of us are so caught up in trying to be that next millionaire or be that next, I don't know, have that high status symbol or whatever, that we don't take time to enjoy the fruits of our work. We seem to think, well, that will happen later. The challenge is the pace we're at later is not as late as it used to be. People of all ages are suffering their health issues. They are even suffering death. And another byproduct of this unrealistic pace that we're at, and the expectations that go with that, is the increased rate of suicide. We're watching suicide grow. And it's not just people that have had a hard life. It's people that are young, and sure, they've faced some challenges, but not the challenges that normally cause people to get hopeless enough to take their life. This is all part of, in my opinion, a lack of a lack of monitoring our pace, and frankly, a lack of wisdom to recognize the things that are going on around us. When we approach things wisely, the big picture perspective, that look at what does this matter in light of this bigger picture, in which that bigger picture for many of us includes a bigger perspective of eternity beyond even the physical life we live now. And when we do take the time to make those considerations, make those observations, we begin to, by its very nature, slow down, and we begin to realize that some of the things that have become culturally important really aren't that important. They aren't critical. They aren't important, especially in light of that bigger perspective, that picture of 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, or eternity, and just really helps us to bring things into priority. In fact, another principle, while waiting for you all's topics and questions, that has to do with our use of time. Many of us struggle with our time, and I hear people saying all the time that I need better time management skills. I challenge that we're not lacking time management skills. And I learned this from a group visited a few years back from an invitation from my friend Gary Fry here on LinkedIn. But one of the things that came out, and I thought this was so profound, is that most of us don't have a time management issue. We have a priority issue, that we have not really established the priorities in our life. What is the top priorities for us? And if we begin to live based on the real priorities of our life, then our time management becomes a natural byproduct. Because if we allow ourselves to live our priority, we will choose to do the things to support that. But it takes an effort to consider what are our priorities. And that goes back to that introspection of the 40-day challenge, learning how to figure out who we are, who we're designed to be. See, the other thing that we have happening a lot of is we're being pressured or molded into our culture rather than us working to make our culture effective and work. We are having our priorities set that the most important things in life, and are one of them is education, has been so elevated. And I'm talking formal academic education. I'm not talking about learning. Learning is very important. We should do that every day. But I'm talking about this idea of formal academic education has been raised to a point that it is so become so important in the lives of people, and created by our culture, by the way, that we're watching young people become hopeless. And that's the reason that a number of them are committing suicide. It's over education and the priority that formal academic education has taken in our lives. That's wrong. That is so wrong. Again, I got to separate between education and learning. We can learn every moment of every day if we choose to, without having to go to get a formal education. And please understand, I'm not saying that we need to not get educated. There is value there, but it's not at the value that we have brought it to in our current cultures, our current societies. But so our priorities, if we get our priorities right, then our time will take care of itself. For example, my vision, my design is to help people find their potential. That's what drives what I do. That's my vision. And as a result, it affects everything I do. The choices I make are about helping people find their potential. And the other component, if you will, in my life at this point, and hopefully you picked up on this from the podcast, is to be a wisdom seeker. We've lost that in most of our societies, where it's about gaining knowledge and status and things like that. And we've lost the notion, the importance, the priority of seeking wisdom in our lives. And as a result, we're making lots of choices that are not wise choices. And that the indication of unwise choices is, one, keep doing the same mistakes over and over and over again. Another one is when we make choices, unwise choices that have consequences that we've either chosen to ignore, or we're so based in knowledge rather than wisdom that we do not see the consequences that go with the choices we make until it's too late to prevent it. Then we're having to figure out how to overcome it. And I'll give you a bigger picture version of unintended consequences and the challenges and problems they create is medical advancements. We are at a point with medical advancements that we are facing choices, for example, of whether to leave someone on life support or not. That's an unintended consequence that came from not considering the innovations or the technology growth in terms of machines and equipment to keep people alive. To what end? We have to ask ourselves and consider whether those ideas that were advanced were wise, because as we look at the consequences that are being created as a result. Lydia makes a comment. Limited beliefs blind us from reality. Don't judge anyone by their appearance. See, judging is an unwise act. Judging, especially based just on people's appearance, that's unwise for us and for the impact on others. And we're seeing it in our culture. We are now labeling people and giving them reasons that by label, limit, and even define people in a way that's not healthy. The fact is that we're all different, labeled or not. We're unique to each other. We share some common ground, no doubt, but we are unique to each other. And when we can learn to accept that uniqueness and accept other people's uniqueness, it makes a huge difference. One of the things that I continue to talk about and is an important concept, and I think it's a very foundational concept, and that's our value. So many of us are still trying to prove and gain our value. We're doing so by our choices in education, our choices in work, our choices in leisure activity. We're trying to somehow demonstrate to the world that we have value. And the challenge is that we do not affect our value as a human being. We are all given great value as human beings by our Creator. That's established. That's not something for question. It's not something for discussion. It's not something to be sought and gained. We are valuable just by being. I've always thought it interesting that we refer to ourselves as human beings, not human doings or doers. There has to be doing and action. And I'm not again saying we should all just sit around and stare out into the cosmos and be around. That's not what I'm talking about. Welcome, Lee. Glad to have you with us. We're having an open mic day today, and we're talking about a variety of topics. And that if you've got a topic or anyone has a topic, feel free to put it out there. Let's talk about it, seek wisdom together on your topic. What's concerning you? What are the choices that you're facing that you would like wisdom in? At the end of the day, part of the way we gain wisdom is by listening to others, to asking questions to others, and consider that that we can gain from other people's lessons. That's a wise way to approach life. We do not have to necessarily suffer through each challenge or adversity to grow in wisdom. There are alternative ways. Uh, Lydia makes a comment that we should never downgrade our self-worth and values. You're so right, Lydia. The challenge is most of us don't accept our value. Most of us think, and this is part of the cultures that we live in, and it's unfortunate that somehow what we achieve, what we do, our jobs, did we write a book and become famous, that somehow that's our value? It's not. It's not at all. Our value is given to us by our Creator, and we can't earn it or we can't lose it. Others can't give it to us, others can't take it away. And when we begin to live that, truly believe it and live it, it can make it makes such a dramatic change in our life, our behavior, our choices, because I really believe that many of us, if we stop and think, are continuing to make choices somehow to prove our value. And this also comes out in relationships. We have a problem with, and I had this, I'm speaking of my own experience here, that we don't think we have value. So there are people that we're trying to prove ourselves to. And the way it comes out sometimes is defeat on our part. Other times it becomes conflict, where we think that in order to have value and purpose, everyone has to acknowledge us, and that everyone has to accept our behaviors and things like that. And that what's really a hideous one is that every other people have to be like us to validate us. None of that's true. None of it matters. Our value as a human, as a person, is given to us. It's established. And anytime we take trying to prove our value, establish our value, is wasted. And it creates emotional and mental turmoil. And it even will cause us to have physical consequences that we don't need to have, because we're still trying to prove who we are, what our value is. We don't have to. It is not necessary. Travis mentions a spark of creation. Travis, that's interesting to me. I'd love to know more about what your thought is. I very much believe that we are created, and that the world we live in has been created, and it is with order and design, and that there is a way to function within that creation and do so wisely. So I'd love to get your perspective as well. And Lee asked a question: is there value to life just because? How about in an unconscious state? How about an unborn baby? Lee, from my perspective, great questions, by the way. Thank you. From my perspective, yes. It doesn't matter what our state is. Unconscious, it doesn't matter whether we are an unborn baby. We all have value in who we are, period. And that if we recognize our value and accept our value, and now bear in mind that one of the things you have to be careful is that we don't look and accept bad behaviors and wrong motivations, things like that. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is just our sheer value as a person. And when we can accept that, and unless we do that, we can't accept others. Because if we're having to prove our value, then our thought is that others should earn their value either for themselves or in our eyes. If we accept our value as a person, unquestioned, unchallenged, then we can begin to accept that in other people. And what happens is affects the amount of judgment of people that is improper, and that it is judgment of people's motivations and hearts. When we don't react based on an assumed judgment or assumed motivation on the part of people, how we respond to those people changes. So, is there value to life just because? Indeed, there is. Yes, that has been established. And the sooner we accept and live in it, the healthier we are. There's another part to Lee's question. How about the incarcerated terrorist? I know this is going, and boy, we could go into this one very deep and long, but yes, incarcerated criminals, terrorists are all people and have value. Now, the question becomes, and where the wisdom must come in, is how do we address the behaviors of valuable people that are making poor choices? That's different. Making good or bad choices doesn't change our value. Not at all. Our value is established, but we still have to consider how do we address the behaviors and choices of people from a societal standpoint, which raises a lot of challenging questions and has throughout history. And that has probably troubled more people over history than not, as to how to deal with people that their behaviors don't line up from a societal standpoint with their value as a human being. Now, one of the things that we have to consider when we consider our value as a human being to really be most effective is understanding that in light of eternity. Now, if we make value judgments based on a limited time frame of our physical life, that's going to affect how we set priorities relative to behaviors and things. But in light of eternity, that changes how we make those choices. So I hope I've answered your question, Lee, that our value, whether we have behaved well or behaved poorly, doesn't matter. Our value is there as a person. That's been established. And now what we do with people's behaviors, that's different. Different doesn't change our value, but it certainly changes the way we will interact with them. Jeremy makes a comment, I believe, not a question. I believe when we assist each other, we become wiser and can lessen our burdens while gaining wisdom that finds solutions. Just like a twig alone can only handle so much tension, a bundle of twigs can handle the load. Indeed. Such an important piece of it is that part of our design as humans, and again, get into a lot more in terms of trying to understand who we are and the where we live and function, is to understand that as a human that I have, and this is a universal design by our Creator, is that we are designed to help each other. We're designed to share our story of overcoming and to help others. In fact, one of the ways it's put wisely is that we are around to help others with the comfort we have received by giving them that same comfort. In other words, we've gone through something and we've learned and gained, and we've been comforted to a point that we were able to get through it, and not only get through it, but grow as a result. And so that's a form of comfort. And when we share that comfort with others, we're fulfilling a universal human design, and that is helping each other. And as you've observed, Jeremy, as part of that process, we gain wisdom. In fact, when we help others, we gain wisdom twice. The first time we gain wisdom is when we go through the process, or the challenge or adversity, and we overcome it. That's the first time. Second time is when we use that and help others to go through and overcome, we actually gain wisdom twice in the process, at least. Let's see. Okay. Lydia makes a comment. The universe is a masterpiece, but is of little value to the spiritually blind. I have to tend to agree that in order for us to fully understand and appreciate our value as a human, we have to understand who we are as a human fully. And one of the things that I've talked about, we'll continue to talk about, is as a human being, we have three parts. There, it's can be more complex in terms of discussion, but general terms, we have three parts as a human being. One of them is a body, and it's the part we see and touch and experience most tangibly. Then there is our soul, and that's where we deal with our emotions and our mental being and so on. But there's a third part, and unfortunately in our societies and cultures today, it has been somehow ignored or given less credence, and that is our spiritual being. And it, just for the record, it's our spiritual being and our soul being that are the essentials of who we are, because we know the body's going to perish. It's going to give up. It's going to quit. That's just the nature of way things are designed. But the soul and spirit continue on. And that's the essential us. And to ignore or somehow say spiritual or spirit is not a factor is unwise. But it has become, unfortunately, a cultural norm to ignore it. So your comment about being spiritually blind, creating a problem for us, is indeed true. If we are not spiritually attuned, we're missing a part of ourselves, missing a part of being part of humanity. Let's see. Travis has a question or comment. Is what allows us to live and create? Oh, it's what allows us to live and create the world around us. It's the light within ourselves to make decisions and actions that dim or brighten that light. I understand talking about creation earlier, Travis. Thank you for that additional information. And indeed, we can be very valuable, but make unwise choices that, as a result, limit our effectiveness and our purpose. Doesn't change our value. That will always be. That never changes. What changes is how we are effective or ineffective, light or not light, in our world. And that is what happens as a matter of choices. And that's why having wisdom to make these choices is so critical, because when we make unwise choices in our life, and to put it the way you mentioned, Travis, that we dim our light by doing so. Doesn't mean we're less valuable. It just means we're not as effective in impacting our world in a positive way. In fact, it can be that we impact our world in a negative way. We see valuable people that have value because they're a person make choices that the result is the impact in our world is very negative. And we've seen it throughout history. And we could get into some really big discussions about those perspectives, but they are perspectives that needs to be considered. Lee, thanks for being here. You have a blessed day as well. So if we take nothing else away today, please understand that we need to seek wisdom on a daily basis in our life. And we can stumble into wisdom. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, that's the way they're approaching life. They're stumbling into wisdom. What we need, though, is we need people that seek wisdom on a minute by minute, day by day basis in their lives, because as we grow in our wisdom, the positive impact on others is remarkable because it affects the way we make our choices. The other thing, if we don't take anything else away, is your value as a person. I've got a quote that's going to be in my quote book about our value. We don't earn it, so we can't lose it. We don't get our value from other people, so they can't take it away. Our value comes from our Creator, and our Creator gives us this value. And because of the character of our Creator, He won't take it away from us. And so our value is established. And I would suggest that many of us, if we just get that in our lives, if we get to a point where we accept our value as a created human being and then live with that being a guiding part of our essential thoughts, our essential perspectives, then it will be a game changer for many of us. What we will find is that it will lessen conflict. It will cause us to be more contented, because our contentment is in not what we do, but being who we are. Contentment is being, having joy about who we have been created and what we are created to do. That's where we find contentment and real peace. And so I just really hope that as you go forward, first of all, be a wisdom seeker. Find that perspective beyond our knowledge and our understanding. Find that perspective in our life that causes us to see that much bigger picture, and from a spiritual standpoint, to see things through God's eyes, our Creator's eyes. When we begin to see things as our Creator does, it causes us to make choices more in line with who we've created to be. Second one is to find and understand and believe in your value as a created being. Our value is great, and we don't need to be taking the time, energy, or effort to try to prove or establish our value. It's done. So go on about finding out who you're designed to be and live that. And as we do that, we all benefit from it, because as part of the design of our universe, our world, our whatever term you want to call it, if we are functioning within our design, which will be unique, then others will benefit as well, because it's all part of a design of humanity. And we can get into a lot of different elements. One of the key ones, I think, and I would suggest that you consider, is the spiritual part of who we are, and getting that understood and established for ourselves. And if anyone ever wants to have a conversation about my journey and discovering the spiritual part of me, more than happy to do that. That's something I approach carefully, because each of us has our own journey in that regard. And what my journey looks like, you could learn from and get insight from, but that doesn't mean you don't have to journey for yourself. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate everyone being here today, the comments, questions, and we'll be back next Monday with Wisdom Seeker Live, hopefully to help each other gain wisdom in a new and different way by being together, and also just to have a time of connecting with each other as humans. So thank you. God bless. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next week on Wisdom Seeker Live podcast. Thanks, everyone. Bye.